It may be only hinting at spring here in Chicago, but we know it's right around the corner because pitchers and catchers and games are actually being played in Arizona and Florida for Major League Baseball spring training. And we're going to break down some fun stuff as we head into Cactus and Grapefruit League here on the Sports Cubicle. It's the marvelous one, Dan Marver, Devin Tingle, Paul Chivari, and myself, Mike Mercado. And Paulie and I have something fun for Paulie. I printed out, that's right, kids, from the actual paper, the power rankings heading into this spring training, and we're going to count down from 30 to 1. I want some general reactions from Paulie, who we know is a savant who loves this game. Check out his podcast, The Baseball Weekend Journal, anywhere you get your favorite podcast at Baseball Weekend Journal. He's been breaking things all down throughout the winter meetings, the GM meetings, and now that we are at spring training. So, Paulie, before we get to the power rankings, how excited are you that as of this recording, as of this weekend, as of this edition of the Sports Cubicle, the Cubs and Sox both would have played games?
Yeah, I'm going to be watching games all weekend. Of course, by the time people hear this, I will have probably digested a few spring training games. I mean, what did I tell you first thing Friday morning? I was like getting juiced for Northeastern University versus the Boston Red Sox. That's how excited I am about this time of year when the games start. And I know it's spring training games, and your favorite players are only going to play maybe an inning if they even play, especially the early spring training games where it's a lot of no-namers, guys that are going to get cut in a couple of weeks, guys that might not ever see Major League action in their lives after the season. But I love that stuff because I think you start seeing what guys are trying out. A lot of people put stock into spring training games needlessly.
Sure.
Where it's like, oh, my team only won like 7 games all spring training. They're going to be bad this year. And it's like, yeah, because they were grooving pitches in. They're probably pitchers trying to test out a new pitch and
working
just
things
hanging
out
it over the plate, or some guys trying to take different cuts at the ball than he normally does, trying different things, pulling the ball, trying to go opposite field, trying to, so don't take too much stock in the wins and losses of the game. Just get excited to see how these players are developing, what they're trying out, what they're doing, how these teams look, what sort of lineups are the managers putting together. So that's what I get excited about. Plus, it's a great way to kill off an afternoon, when you got the day off, just pop on the game, get something done. You got it on in the background.
It'll get us to the tournament. It'll get us to March Madness. So, all right.
And speaking of tournaments, we also have the World Baseball Classic this year. So that's something to get excited about in a couple weeks.
And you'll be breaking all that down. And I love hearing your international talk because during the pandemic, you really saved us with some Korean baseball breakdown. So we'll shout you out to that one.
What's going on? Yeah.
All right, you ready to do this?
Yeah, let's do it.
Because we have something important I do want to talk about at the end of this conversation, but a little bit of fun before we get to something serious, okay? At number 30, Cincinnati Reds.
Okay.
At number 29, the Washington Nationals.
Yeah.
28, the Oakland Athletics.
Yeah, I might put the A's a little bit lower than the Nationals, but yeah, those essentially the 3 that you named off right there are the teams that are totally rebuilding, not expected to do anything great. You might see some great players bubble up to the surface that you didn't hear about before.
So what about teams like at 28, the Athletics, at 27, the Tigers, at 26, the Rockies, at 25, the Royals, and at 24, the Pirates?
Don't sleep on any of those teams because I think that's the next tier of they're not rebuilding anymore. They're definitely making strides towards being competitive teams. Now, I don't think any one of those 4 teams that you named are going to make the playoffs this year, but don't sleep on teams like the Tigers. They have great talent on those teams. We have yet to see Spencer Torkelson break out and be the stud that he was supposed to be, or Riley Green be as good as he was going to be. So don't sleep on a team like that. You saw flashes of the Pirates last year, with I think O'Neal Cruz and Ke'Bryan Hayes, guys like that, are going to be really good. Pirates are a little bit of a mess right now, but I think they're better than people give them credit for. The Royals have always kind of seemed like they're rebuilding, but they've got great talent. They're bringing back Zach Greinke again this year. So, I think they still have Whit Merrifield as well. There's talent on that roster, and it's an easy division. So, I mean, that, Tigers Royals could be a sleeper team that could win the division just based on the fact that they play in a weak division, and the White Sox, Guardians, and Twins don't scare me.
And we'll circle back to both AL and NL Centrals as we go along here locally for Cubs and White Sox. I'm glad you brought that up. At 23, the Miami Marlins, and at 22, the San Francisco Giants. But we get to number 21, the Chicago Cubs. Now, spending just a few minutes on each team, but I think what's interesting about the Cubs it's one of two things. And I know it's pretty easy to say just because of averages, but I think this Cubs season could go either way. I think they could either win the NL Central or they win 77 games. I think there's a chance that this team can win a weak division or can struggle and ship off a lot of bullpen arms, can ship off some expiring contracts and still be looking forward to the future for a few more years with some of these young guys that they brought in, looking into maybe the Shohei Ohtani sweepstakes, whatever that may be. But I see the Cubs, it's just a fork of the road. It's two ways it can go. I don't think they're going to be an 81 win team.
They could be right at 500 though, the way they're built.
Perhaps. But that's what I'm saying. I don't think it's going to be one of these, they're going to win 90 something games or they're going to win 60 games. I think it's that 77 to 83 win.
They're a 500 team, much like they were last year, but I think we kind of pegged them at 500 or below. And I forgot where they ended up, but it was close to 500.
It was right around, it was like 77, 78.
Yeah, it was somewhere about where I thought they would be. Yeah. This year, they're a little bit better than they were last year.
Defensively, they look nice.
Offensively, they look nice. It all depends on the pitching pipeline, which
looks young and nice.
Yeah, young and nice. Better than it has in years. I think it's easy to be optimistic if you're a Cubs fan. But I mean, you're looking at it through Cubby-colored lenses right now, and I think...
And against the few years that we've seen, this looks so much more promising that, it can
and of course, you're comparing it to a weak Central Division
100%
once again,
more than
you already named off two teams below them that shouldn't be expected to do anything. But there's a lot of question marks with, it's nice to get a scratch and win on Cody Bellinger,
but
because if it hits, this is a guy that was MVP
100%.
Quality a few years ago,
100%.
But at the same time, there's maybe a reason for that drop-off.
And are you going to pay him if he snaps?
And that too. And then Eric Hosmer's another one, which is like an older, less higher of a ceiling. But at the same time, it could all click.
If Matt Mervis clicks, if Justin Steele, if you get Cody Hoyer, there are plenty of young people.
Can Patrick Wisdom hit the ball? Where's Horner going to fit into things?
The kids that are down in the
minors
right now.
Brennan Davis, those guys. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be excited about with the Cubs, but honestly, I'd be shocked if they win the division this year.
I mean, I'm as a betting person, just because of what the Sharks are giving me as odds, I'm willing to say they'll win a division on a betting board.
Yeah.
I don't know in reality if we're making predictions like, they're going to win the NL Central. But if you're willing to give me decent odds on a betting website, I'll take it simply. I like some of the moves.
They might be fun to play game to game on the
That's
run
what it's going to be.
Though,
yeah, they're going to be. That's what I think more than it is, Paulie, and we'll move on from the list because I do want to get to some White Sox too, is I think more than anything, they're a pro team now. It's like they're going to be in games. So the games that they lost by accident or because they were a bad team, they might win. And that changes the entire season. Cub fans, do not book your tickets to late October into a series, but a World Series. But September might be interesting.
No, but at least we don't have to bide our time waiting for Jason Hayward's contract to end.
Bingo,
they're not committed to bad money. They're not committed to bad players. They're at a point where, like you were saying, they could be in on the Shohei Ohtani sweepstakes next year. They might be a couple players away. Kind of fill in rushes. This is going to be the year where you see that next Cubs division champion or that next Cubs playoff team. Some of the core members are probably going to be popping up this year.
It's a great way of putting it. Yeah, there's definitely that opportunity of seeing that mixture, those ingredients become something. Whether it ends up with a commissioner's trophy or just ends up with an entertaining team, it's all within the realm of possibilities. But we'll run through a couple of these really fast because I do want to end up with the good guys on the south side. So at 21, the Chicago Cubs will be covering that and seeing how that plays out, of course. Baseball Weekend Journal, Paulie Dangerous is all over
you mentioned Miami already, and I think they're going to be an interesting team. I think that's a team that people are sleeping on, especially after they made that trade.
Cy Young.
Cy Young Award winner, but they traded Pablo Lopez for Luis Arias from the Twins. That kind of fills them out a little bit. Yeah, they got rid of their captain, Miguel Rojas, going to the Dodgers, but that's an interesting team that they're building in Miami, and they're
in a tough division.
Yeah, tough division. Very tough division, but an interesting team nonetheless.
It's 21 the Cubs, 20 Arizona. We're going to run through these a little bit fast.
19. Arizona surprised me how high they are, but at the same time, I think people sleep on them a lot, and maybe that's why.
That'll be something as we go on later on this spring training we'll talk about. Red Sox at 19, Orioles at 18, the Rangers at 17. Another team you and I are really going to have to talk about because of the amount of spending and some of the Jacob deGrom deal. So we'll get into that as the season goes a little bit deeper.
Bruce Bochy at the helm too. So
which is interesting.
That's a team that should be performing better than 17th.
At 16, the Los Angeles Angels, a team that both teams in Chicago are going to have interest in. A lot of interesting players, a lot of moving parts. We'll see what happens if they decide to actually sell the team. I don't think they got the amount of money they were hoping to maybe get offered, which is why you've seen it kind of cool down a little bit. But at 16, the LA Angels are really interesting.
I got to look at rosters again, but Brandon Chivari seems to be the only name that pops out to me that they improve their roster with.
Yeah,
we do this every year with the Angels.
We do.
I mean, how many games did Trout and Ohtani finally play together last year, and they still couldn't, improve things. So I know they're no longer committed to that bad Albert Pujols contract. Anthony Rendon didn't work out quite the way that they thought it would. Now Artie Moreno's not planning on selling the team.
That was the thing,
So is it going to be more of the same with the Angels? I expect it to be. I'd be shocked this year too if they made the playoffs. But at the same time, I think now that the Astros won another World Series, you're going to see a little bit of a drop off from them. And I don't know if Seattle's totally real yet. And of course, we have the Texas Rangers in the fold as well. So and it's an interesting division. I just think people, because of Ohtani and Trout, are very high on the Angels, and two players aren't going to win it for you. You need to field 25 every single day.
You're here on the Sports Cubicle. It's the marvelous one, Dan Marver, Devin Tingle, Paul Chivari, and myself, Mike Mercado. We are looking at these power rankings from ESPN.com as we have our Cubbies and our Sox playing their first games in spring training. And speaking of the White Sox, we saw the Cubs at 21. Both Paul and I are interested to see how this plays out for this new look Cubs team, a new, really nice looking defensive team, but a team that's looking for the bounce back at 15 are Chicago White Sox as well. So we have the Cubs and White Sox about 6 ranking from apart.
And I think they're being very generous to the White Sox.
Okay, I wanted to go this way with you.
It surprises me that they would have the Rangers and the Angels below the White Sox, considering, we've talked about it ad nauseum on this show about what they didn't do in the offseason, and then the fact that, you don't even know right now if Mike Clevinger is really going to fulfill his 30 wins if he's...
So hold on to that Clevinger thing, because that'll be the end of this conversation.
So we still have rotation issues. All of that stems on, can Pedro Grifol keep the team accountable for their actions? But I just heard a recent interview with Tim Anderson where he's trying to blame the media for some of the stuff around the team. And at the same time, it's like, you guys didn't win. You guys were a mess. Don't blame the media for that.
So that is something that I hope you and Devin are really going to get a chance to break through over the next few weeks, whether it's this edition of the Sports Cubicle or the next few weeks of kind of that new feel from that interview that came out with Chuck Garfien and Tim Anderson. So I'm so excited to hear two White Sox fans, and somebody like you who's a lover of baseball and the history, and kind of seeing how this White Sox team went from, those are some cool players, those are our guys, to what is wrong with them in 3 years?
Let me plant this right now. This is the first red flag, because like I was saying, it all stems on Grifol being able to hold the team accountable. That was number one, what Grifol said when he came in was accountability. But then when you have Tim Anderson blaming the media for the way they were covering the team, that says to me that the message has not resonated enough with him. I know Grifol can't control everything that comes out of Tim's mouth, but that seems like a total lack of accountability to, you got to ride with us, we got to be pulling from the same string, saying things like that. And it's like, no, you guys were a mess. You guys were a total mess. I don't want to list all of the reasons right now. We need to move on from 2022. And already that's a bad start. 2023 is off to a bad start, and they have yet to throw a pitch as you and I are recording this.
It's so frustrating, Paulie. And we have to move on, because we could do this for the next 30 shows on the White and all this. But
I think ESPN's finally being generous to the White Sox with this list.
So we'll circle back to the Clevinger thing in just a moment. So we'll run through these really fast, okay? At 14, you have the Minnesota Twins.
Okay.
At 13, the Brewers. At 12, the Guardians, and at 11, the Cardinals. Just a quick minute on that. This is what I'm saying.
One of those 4 teams has got to win their division.
This is exactly my point.
One of those 4 teams has got to win that division. Right? And if it's not one of those 4 teams, but this is right now where you're listening is all these like fringe teams. Like, of course, someone is going to have to be the division representative in the playoffs and get into the divisional round automatically. And
the wild card weirdness.
The wild card weird. Yeah. So one of these teams might end up in the wild card. But you're at that point now of the list of these fringy, well, they should be better than what we're giving them credit for, but they are not as good as the teams that you're about to list off.
Which is why I think White Sox and Cub fans should have some form of a little bit of optimism in February and March, because you're not looking at the teams that we're going to see on the top half.
They're
right there for
sort
you.
Of arbitrary power ranking list, and power rankings have really no science to it other than preference. It's all preference, and I think the White Sox are miles behind the Cardinals Cardinals.
We have an hour to fill, okay?
I know.
We need to do that. Hey, Paul, okay? The fans of the Sports Cubicle.
But where are the Cardinals ranked? 11, you said?
Yeah.
And the White Sox are 15.
Yeah.
And I think there's way more space in between the quality of those two teams.
We're purely off talent and what expectations are and what ceilings are and what projections are. These teams, I do feel, are a lot closer than historically speaking.
Yeah.
But this is why I'm telling you.
I'll let you know in a month.
For sure, but this is why, we make the joke of it's only February. We got to fill content is, just wait until, August when we're doing NFL power rankings. And talking about Aaron Rodgers and Derek Carr. But we'll go by these really fast so that we can get Paulie a few minutes on Clevinger. 10 is the Mariners, 9 are the Rays, 8 are the Phillies, 7 are the Blue Jays, 6 are the Dodgers, 5 are the Padres, 4 are the Mets, 3 are the Yankees, 2 are the Braves, and 1 are your defending Major League Baseball World Series champion, Houston Astros. Paulie, in 1 minute, your thoughts of the top tier teams. It sounds about right?
The Rays, I can't figure out the Rays, and that's maybe my problem, but I don't think they deserve to be a top 10 team. I get why they're always up there because, I always sleep on them. A lot of people always sleep on them, but I don't see how they improved. And I'd have to look at rosters. I forgot there's a key loss to that team. I think, G-Man Choi, I think, is on the Pirates now, I want to say. So it's like
there's some moves
you lose some of the chemistry or some of the look of that team a little bit, but they always seem to crank out great pitchers out of nowhere. So I think Rays are a little bit too high on the list. I think, people love the Mets for some reason.
Spend a lot of money.
I don't think adding Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander are going to be the complete thing.
And I know you'll break this down on Baseball Weekend Journal. Who's going to regret their moves more? The Rangers signing DeGrom or the Mets signing Verlander, Scherzer? Performance-wise,
probably the Mets, just because they're committing to two old dudes and the bottom should drop off. But at the same time, the Rangers know the injury history that comes with DeGrom.
Yeah.
And the Rangers kind of feel like we've seen this happen with teams before. Like the Padres from 10 years ago kind of did this, where it's like they go kind of all in on guys like Adrian Gonzalez and dudes like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, on paper, this team looks like a bunch of killers, but then they struggle to get to 500, and then they have to blow the whole thing up and start over. That's what the Rangers should be good. But that's what the Rangers feel like to me. It's like, all right, you committed a lot of money to 4 or 5 good players. Can you get that return?
So Paulie will be all over this. He's one of the best in the business. I love hearing him go ahead and nerd out, dork out, and meatball out for Major League Baseball. It's the Baseball Weekend Journal. But as we wrap up here on this segment of the Sports Cubicle, Mike Clevinger, still a White Sox, gonna pitch, no repercussions. We'll see. All this allegedly, his lawyer's talking about suing 670 the score.
Has he? I mean,
no, not
the
yet.
score said
Apparently
they haven't received anything yet. And even then, I don't think there's any case there. The potential defamation case.
No,
because it's they're talking to the accuser. What's weird to me is, Did this woman get advice from her lawyers that it was okay to go on the radio and talk about this? I know there's not a criminal investigation going on. It's a domestic violence MLB investigation. So that, the worst they can do is just suspend him. He's not going to see jail time for it. But it just seems weird to me that during an ongoing investigation, she would crow to the media about it. I know that the station did their due diligence, or did their responsibility from a journalistic standpoint to give her the platform. The voice. So I don't know, and I don't want to take sides on this thing because this is like the Trevor Bauer thing. Is everyone's quick to vilify him, but we don't know what happened exactly. And I think that it's the twofold thing of you should listen to a woman when she's crying about domestic violence, but at the same time, not every woman is completely forthright and honest. So you don't know unless you're there investigating the facts and talking to these people and looking into those things. So I'm not going to choose a side, but at the same time, I think I didn't listen to her interview, so I can't really speak to her, but I heard what Clevinger said, and he seems really immature about all of this, and it's not making him look good at all.
It doesn't make the organization look good either.
And that the organization has already done a lot of things where it's like we don't really know, we can't really trust the Chicago White Sox as an organization, the way they go about their business. And if it's found out, obviously Major League Baseball is going to, act if he did something wrong. But if the White Sox, if it's proven that the White Sox were aware of this when they signed him, when there was guys like Johnny Cueto still available that wanted to play on the team, that's a terrible look for the White Sox. So I'm hoping that all of this is a bunch of noise, but I anticipate that we're not going to see Mike Clevinger make his final start in September for the ball club.
And we'll see these allegations, domestic violence, domestic abuse towards the woman in question, and of course their child. So we'll see how this plays out. And we are so fortunate to have one of the best in the business who's going to cover all this stuff on the field, off the field, in the front office, and everything in between. It's the Baseball Weekend Journal with our very own Paulie Dangerous, Paul Chivari. Let us know your thoughts. We're on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV. The story with Michael Clevinger. How has it affected you as a White Sox fan and your relationship with the team? What are your thoughts of the power rankings? Where did your favorite team land? We're on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV. It's the marvelous one, Dan Marver. It's Devin Tingle. It's Paul Chivari. I'm Mike Mercado.